We have an exciting partnership to announce before we get into today's Scuttlebutt. Scuttlebutt has been asked to join Reads Across America Radio, a 24/7 internet radio station where you can listen to veteran stories 24/7. You can find that on the iHeartRadio app. You can also find it on their website, readsacrossamerica.org. The Scuttlebutt will be featured Friday nights at 9 p.m. and Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. If you don't know anything about Reads Across America, they're an incredible organization, all dedicated to honoring veterans and those who gave all in service to our country. Check out the Scuttlebutt on their radio station and all the other programs that they have on their 24/7 radio station, again, on iHeartRadio app or readsacrossamerica.org. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club. We're a nonprofit in Western PA whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. Today's guest is Matthew Landis. He is an Air Force veteran and has an incredible story to tell. After his service, he fell heavy into addiction. And I'm not going to ruin any of the story for you because it's a fascinating story, but it's a redemption story about how he was able to claw himself back into life. And what he used to do that was getting into the outdoors and hiking, and not just any hikes. He did the Pacific Rim Trail twice so far and has many more hikes planned because it's something that has helped him to regain his life and his sense of self and his sense of purpose. Like I said, this is an incredible story. Thank you so much for listening in on the Scuttlebutt podcast. Always interested to hear from my audience. You can reach out to me, Sean, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org with any comments, thoughts, or questions. If you got ideas for upcoming Scuttlebutts, I'd be happy to dive into anything. Or if you're a veteran and you'd like to share your story, reach out to me. We can sit down, do a recording, and create a podcast out of it. Love to do that as well. So enjoy the show, and please like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us to continue to build this community that we are so passionate about. Thank you again. Enjoy the show. Joining me today for the Scuttlebutt is Matthew Landis. Matthew, you are an Air Force veteran, and you have quite a story to share. You were a part of the VBC's Veterans History Project. People can watch that interview separate of the Scuttlebutt podcast, but in producing that interview, I noticed that there was a lot more that we could dive into. And I thought maybe we'd start maybe at ground zero here and kind of get a background from you of your history. But there's a lot to get into here that I'm sure will be very interesting for our audience. Matt, welcome to the podcast. I'd love for you to introduce yourself.
Thank you so much, man. It's a real pleasure to be here. Yes, Matthew Landis, United States Air Force Gulf War veteran. So I went in and enlisted in the Air Force in 1989. Mm-hmm. And I did my 4-year term, got out in 93, and actually re-enlisted back in 2006. When I re-enlisted, I went into the reserves, but I was active duty for my 4-year term in 1989, right during the time when the first Gulf War was, we were bombing Baghdad, I believe, when I was in basic training. So it was quite the intro to the to the military world, but it was an honor to serve. I still look back on it as one of the, I can look at my life and say, what are the things I'm proud of? And serving my country was absolutely by far, looking back, one of the greatest accomplishments of my life. So it's been an honor, and to share about it, with those who have served and those who are even thinking of serving, and maybe those who are or struggling. I feel like I've been given a story to share, not to be buried. Yeah. And it's an honor to be able to share with you today.
Awesome. And you were in the reserves from 06 till
06 to 09.
06 to 09. Let's go back to 89 though. Why did you decide to enlist?
So at the time, I was a college basketball player. I was playing for Springfield College in Massachusetts. I had a full scholarship, and I got injured, and I went down to spring break in Panama Beach, Florida, right near the Eglin Air Force Base. And next door to where we were staying, there was a guy who had, it seemed to me, like everything. This was the guy who had the car, he had the apartment, he had this sharp uniform. He always had like just a good looking girl, I was like, and we had this conversation one day, and he was like, why don't you join the Air Force, man? You can actually play basketball, for the Air Force on a base team and travel with them. And I thought, no way, it's not true. So I walked to a recruiter, and I must have been just like exactly what he was looking for, because he was like, "Oh yeah, sure, you can play basketball for the Air Force." And like I said, when I was in is when we started the bombing in Baghdad. So I went in with the hopes of aspiring to become like this guy that I had met down there, that uh, he had all these things in life. And as at the time I was just 18 years old, I thought, yeah, man, I would love that life. So the recruiter said, yeah, sure enough, you can play basketball for the Air Force. So I enlisted, and during my enlistment, my basic training, I was categorized over into civil engineer. So it went from, hopefully being able to play basketball to civil engineer without a choice. And I actually never picked up a basketball again.
Wow.
So I was college basketball player, decided the Air Force was a better path for me in my life. At the time, excuse me, I was really suffering from a lot of mental health issues um, that had been part of my past, my childhood, that were really starting to come out in my life. Excuse me. And as a young man that grew up without a father, I was I was I was really, really seeking um I was seeking guidance. I was seeking mentorship. But I'll tell you, the Air Force had a way of making sure that I sure knew what discipline was.
Yeah.
Um, and I quickly learned yes or no, sir, and right from wrong, how to behave, respect for authority, things I grew up in New York that I did not have. So it took me, and it kind of molded me into someone who was capable of learning from others and really opening up my mind to the possibility of that discipline is exactly what I needed in my life at the time. So yeah, the Air Force was a great decision. And yeah, I look back on it with nothing but pride.
So you didn't come from a military family. This was really just you kind of saw like a path forward for like, oh, like that seems like a pretty cool lifestyle and went for it.
Yeah, well, actually, it's funny because every male in my family that I traced back to my great grandfather had served.
Oh,
So my father passed when I was my dad actually overdosed and died when I was 19 years old.
mm,
But he was in the Navy beforehand. He was the United States Navy. He was on a submarine, one of the first nuclear submarines. My only uncle was a retired full bird colonel in the Air Force,
mhm.
and my grandfather was in the Navy, and his 9 brothers were all in the military in some way, shape, or form. So, military in my family, and I grew up right by, touching the West Point Military Academy.
Okay.
So, Army was, I actually had Army. West Point had come to my house to recruit me to play basketball, and I had gone to the West Point prep school, and I was thinking of going that way. And my mom, who had worked at Army, she was the director of football operations for West Point.
Hmm.
She was like, I don't mind if you go in the military, just not Army. Just if you're gonna go, just go. If you're gonna do like your uncle and go Air Force. So I kind of followed in the footsteps of my uncle and my dad, my grandfather. So I knew when I was making the decision, it was a good decision. It was
Hmm.
specific. It was something that I did not quote unquote want to do, but I knew in my heart I needed it.
Hmm.
So, which is kind of rare for someone that's 18. I was very, very lucky to make that decision.
Changes the calculus a little bit for my sort of thought process there because I kind of figured that you had found the military, but military
Yeah.
wasn't something foreign to you as you grew up.
No. Yeah. It was actually, I could hear at West Point, you could hear the cadets up there cheering how many days it was to the Army Navy game, what's for dinner on the menu. You could hear these chants and stuff. And I always thought, man, no way. But here I am, 18 years old, signing up for the Air Force in the middle of a war.
So were you deployed after basic?
I was not. I
Mhm.
was fortunate. I wound up stateside my entire term. I went from Eglin, Texas to Colorado to Eglin Air Force Base, um, back to Texas. I'm sorry, back to Colorado.
Mhm.
So I was stationed at Cheyenne, the mountain they call it, the Cheyenne. It was my first assignment, And Lowry Air Force Base was in Denver, Colorado at the time. And I remember I went to re-enlist after my 4-year term. And I believe it was Clinton was president at the time. They had just passed a big thing through Congress that they were downgrading the military. So they closed Lowry Air Force Base. I went in to re-enlist and I sat next to the guy, the sergeant, and he said to me, "We'd love to have you come back. You're a great airman. You're got good conduct medals. You're never in trouble. So we'd love to have you. But if you want to stay, you have to go back to tech school because civil engineering is being outsourced to the civilian world. So we need you to be like maybe a nurse or something." And my first daughter had been just born. And I had a long discussion with my wife and made the decision at the time to become a civilian and try to make a life from what I had learned in the Air Force as a civil engineer and take that into my civilian life, which I did.
How was that first transition out?
Um, Extremely challenging for me. Um, the discipline and stuff that I had mentioned before that I didn't have, I realize now at 21, 20, 18, 19, 20, 22, that once that military discipline was gone, the childhood New Yorker discipline started to come back into my life. I started to get in trouble. Um, and I, and it was not too long after that, that I began, what turned out to be a 25-year battle with addiction. So I had gone from, casually drinking and whatnot in the military. I got in and it was like the thing to do was to drink. And I kind of carried that one thing, the drinking, over with me from my military career into my civilian life. And it became the foundation of my daily existence was alcoholism. And I can tell you more about that if you'd like, whenever. But like, it was a very difficult time for me to go from having discipline in the military life to, as a civilian, you can like call in sick and stuff. And I used all my sick days and all these things and stuff. In the military, you didn't have an option. There's no such thing. And I there was no guidance in 1993. I don't remember any like class that you went to like that was like
TAP,
you're gonna yeah, it's just like sign here. And then when you walk out the door, it's like you turn in your ID and you're done. Just done. And I could not, without any mentorship in my life, I couldn't put it all together. And I really wound up struggling with my mental health.
So that was a good 7-year chunk before you re-enlisted into the reserves.
Yes,
Were you struggling with finding a job, addiction, different things throughout those 7 years?
completely. Yes. I was so I had such a belief in my mind that that discipline that I had lost, I wanted it back. And I wanted that I was still holding on to that yes or no, sir, and wanting that mentorship in my life. And yet I was a civilian running around now living up in the mountains of Colorado. And yeah, man, I felt like I wanted to give it another try, and I did.
The big thing that happened though in those 7 years was 9/11. So between 93, 2001,
Absolutely.
so take us through sort of 9/11, because what I find always interesting is the guys who like my age who are getting out of high school. 9/11 happens, they enlist, they're off to Afghanistan and Iraq, and there's this sort of big swell of
Yeah.
national pride, support, war on terror. In 01, where were you, and what happened during 9/11?
I was in Colorado, and I remember my whole family is back in New York, right by, and my brother and my sister worked in New York City. And so on 9/11, when that happened, um, I I flew home 35 days later. So I just had to go, and I had to be there, and I had to see what happened to where I grew up. And I lived 30 minutes from there. And like um I video back when video cameras were not on your phone, they were like a big handheld thing. I videoed just what I had saw, and the impact it had on me was I knew that I wanted to reenlist. I was struggling so much with addiction and drinking that I wasn't ready to go back in yet. There's no way I would have been able to show up. And I thought by the time 2006 came around that I was starting to get I had just started going to meetings like AA and NA and things like that to try to get a handle on it, but I couldn't. And I wound up, I think that's why looking back, I didn't go active duty. I went back in as reserve because in my heart, I knew I wasn't healthy.
Mhm.
And yeah, 9/11 was a major impact on why I reenlisted.
Did
Huge impact.
did 9/11 cause you to dive further into addiction?
No, I wouldn't say that. I'd say um by then I was so heavy into my usage that
Mm-hmm.
um it just became exactly what I needed to do every day to survive.
Yeah.
So the depression and things from my childhood that I mentioned previously, those things start to manifest.
Yeah.
And I believe now, and looking back and being healthy now for over 2 years and 5 months, I believe now that things that happen to us, and this is my experience, things that happen to us at any point in life that are traumatic, they have a way of storing themselves and manifesting themselves in other ways of our life. And it could be in the sense of physical things, such as unexplained sickness, or you can have, I've had tumors, I've had my right hip, all of a sudden just, it's where my body stores trauma.
Hmm.
And discovering that was a huge turn on my getting healthy. I realized I was using because I was feeling unhealthy, and I just was in this cycle of circular. Well, I wake up, I don't feel good, so I'll use. Boom, I use. Oh, I don't feel good, so we'll just keep repeating the same pattern over and over and over.
Yeah.
And so no, yeah, addiction is a vicious battle, and it was a vicious battle for me.
I want to get to sort of how you were able to overcome that, but I'm glad that we're laying the groundwork for how severe it was, because
Very
your
much.
recovery and your ability to come out of that is really at the heart of what I heard in the Veterans History Project interview that made me want to dive further.
Yes,
Um,
sir.
so, '06, how do you, what I don't understand, how could you go like have addiction but still be able to get into the reserves?
Yeah,
Were you able to get yourself healthy enough, or was it something that was able to
yeah.
be hidden?
I was very good at hiding it.
Mm.
I was addicted to opiates,
Hmm.
and the more I could get my hands on, the better I'd be at things like physical therapy. I could build a house in a day
Yeah.
on on drugs. I'm serious. It was just over my. I remember like my scores for physical fitness were extremely high. Like I had no problem staying physically in shape, um, with the minimum requirements of the Air Force, and things like that. It was the mental that, like, I wasn't, like, I screwed up a few times. I didn't show up on weekends, and things like that were going on. I finally had a conversation with with my sergeant. I told him, look, this is what's going on. I just got accepted into a place across the river in New York for me called the Montrose, New York VA system. They have a 30-day program that I'm going to go see if 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 I'm sick, I had no idea. And I did a 30-day. And after that 30 days, I I thought I had it. Like I was already on step 7 in my 12-step program recovery. I was like rushing through it, but I felt I had the mindset and the clarity that I could re-enlist and I could make it. And I did.
Hmm.
But it reared its ugly head as time rolled by. And Landis isn't showing up for this. He's not showing up for that. He's not looking right. Like something's wrong. So I had to go. I had to come to them and say, look, this is what's going on. I need help. So I wound up going to get some help. That was the beginning of getting help, which lasted for decades.
How difficult was it to admit that there was a problem and then say, I need to find help?
So for me, first of all, it's a great question. Um, for me, hiding things from myself became the most incredible discovery at how deceptive I was to self,
Hmm.
of fooling myself that there was always the word tomorrow and the procrastination of tomorrow that I could take or do. And weeks go by, they turn into months and then turn into years. And next thing um, you know, admitting to myself that I had a problem was far more challenging than to admitting to other people. Like, I remember sitting in the Atlanta, Georgia. I had been homeless for a while, and I was in Atlanta, Georgia. I got picked up off the streets there. I got in some trouble. I wound up at the VA, and I remember sitting across from the chief director of the entire program. I had been there for a month, and they were considering kicking me out again for the second time in a month. She sat me down. She said something I'll never forget. She said, "Matthew, I think that you are a lot more sick than you know. You don't know how sick you are. And that's what's stopping you." And I was taken aback by that. I was like, "How dare you? Like, I know I'm sick. I know," but I didn't know how sick I was. And that comes from what you asked about, admitting to yourself and saying, "Look, dude, here are the cards. This is what you got. Your dad died from it. Your brother overdosed from it. And the devil isn't going to stop until he's got you." And it was from that conversation, and that was in 2015. From that conversation was born the idea that I didn't want my daughters to get a phone call like I did and saying, "Your dad lost his battle with addiction and he's gone." Like, I just couldn't do that to my kids. So, excuse me. So I just started to fight harder and harder and harder, because I love my kids. And I wouldn't wish that on anybody, to get that type of phone call. And once I realized that I was that sick and that my daughters were in a position that they could get that phone call, I began to take things a lot more serious, and I began to ask for help. I did wind up again getting kicked out of that VA though in Atlanta. And I remember them helping me look for another place to go. And they were like, "We don't know where you're going to go, but you can't stay here anymore. You're breaking all the rules. You're not showing up on time. You're leaving on weekends. You're not coming back. Enough." And they applied to 3 different facilities around the country, somewhere in New York, somewhere in California, and somewhere in Wyoming. Well, somewhere in Wyoming turned out to be a gift. They accepted me into a program out there that was an 8-week program, a longer term program. And the beauty of it was it was nestled right at the base of the Bighorn Mountains. So my assignment in the Air Force in Colorado, while I was stationed in Colorado, I didn't mention, but I got introduced to along with the negative, the positive was I got introduced to an entire new world in the outdoors in the mountains of Colorado. The Rocky Mountains absolutely became my weekend. I wound up living there for 7 years. We moved up to Breckenridge. Well, I had lost all that for a decade. I had lost all. I was sleeping on this, literally sleeping on the streets of Georgia. I still have the sign in my box that says, "Veteran needs help, please." Like, I got kicked out of that one. And when they sent me to, excuse me, I will say, brother, just so you know, between me and you, I had a TBI and a traumatic brain injury in 2015. So if I bounce around a little bit in my head with the dates and stuff and I get messed up, I apologize, but I'll get back on track. But the VA that accepted me out in Wyoming, nestled at the base of the foothills, man, I fell in love with the outdoors again. I started going, I'd get a weekend pass on Thursday and I'd come back on Sunday. I had a backpack and all I did was no drugs, no drinking. I'd go right up to the mountains. I'd backpack, I'd explore. I went to Cloud Peak Wilderness. I started keeping a log of all the places I went. And that turned into, I went through that program over and over. Like, after the third time, it became apparent that the outdoors were going to be something in my future. Hope that kind of lays the ground of something.
It does. It brings up one question. is how did you become homeless? And
Yeah,
when,
great
when did
question.
that happen?
Well, like a lot of my stories, brother, and it starts out like this. So there was this girl. I'm dead serious.
Yeah.
There was a girl, and I chased her, man. I was in love, and I went from having a car and being in therapy uh, in Jacksonville, Florida. I met someone. We kind of bounced around the country together. She wound up going back to Georgia. I went out to Georgia. I had a little bit of cash. I'm talking a couple $100, but I had my car, so I could sleep in the car. And on my birthday, July 22nd in 2015, in that car, I was with a stranger, a complete stranger I had just met that morning, asking for a cigarette. Dead serious, true story on my daughter's life. Every single word, this is absolutely true.
Mhm.
I sat next to her and watched her stick a needle in her arm. And she asked me if I wanted to get high. Absolutely. Absolutely. I wanted to get high. It was my birthday. For the first time, I stuck a needle in my arm, and whoever that girl was saved my life because she called 911. I overdosed. I woke up in that Burger King parking lot. I was on the concrete, and there was a person over me with a bag on my mouth, and they were punching the back. I could hear them talking. My ears were ringing, and they were pumping air into my brain after hitting me with a second dose of Narcan. They were trying to get me back to life. So I wake up, and they rushed me to the ER. And on the way, there's a nurse, an EMT nurse that stays in the car with me. She gets off work. She stays with me at the hospital. This woman looked exactly like my mom. And she
Hmm.
sat there and she goes, and she was an angel, man. I'm telling you, this is what she said. She goes, Matthew, I stayed to let you know because no one else is going to tell you that
Mhm.
you were dead in that parking lot when we came. You were gone. We broke the window in your car and we pulled you out and we pumped air into your brain because she kept saying it, you were dead. Like, I don't think she wasn't, I didn't get it.
Mhm.
And to me, it was kind of a funny, I remember giggling because I was still high. But the seriousness in her face was, and she said to me, I don't know if you're open to it. And I don't know if you want this, but there's a place here in Georgia that you can get help. And it's called and it's the VA medical facility here in Georgia. And that was how I got into that. Oh, they repossessed my car.
Okay.
So when I was in Burger King, they took my car, they impounded it, which I had no money to get out. I was already behind on payments. So Chevy came and picked that up. So I went from in the car in the Burger King parking lot to walking out of the emergency room with a bunch of papers in my hand. My wallet was in the car. I had a identification wristband from the hospital, and that's it, dude. So I wound up going and sleeping underneath the bridges in Fulton County. Um, I got arrested for stealing a beer at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 4th of July. Um,
Dangerous?
dangerous,
Was it dangerous under the
dangerous,
bridge? Were there other homeless?
dangerous,
Like, yeah.
dangerous, brother.
Mhm.
Like, I was not in a healthy area. I was in a very dangerous, very, very bad area. And being from New York, like, I knew where I was at. It was in danger, but I was confident. Like, I was like, no one's gonna mess with me. Like, I felt okay with that. And unfortunately though, I just kept diving more into drugs.
Mhm.
And
And didn't
when I
OD again, just getting
yeah,
the kick.
yes, sir. I never stuck a needle in my arm again after that day. And I never messed with heroin again after that day.
Mhm.
Um and and it was that lady at that VA was the one who said to me, I don't think you know how sick you are. She was going on and on. And it was there that I realized, like, I need longer term care. This 30-day thing is not working. They're kicking you out in a week. You're in serious trouble. You just died. You need help. Like, that's
Mhm.
when it really hit me, like, man, I am sick.
Where were your kids? Your, I'm guessing, ex-wife at this point. Where were they?
Yeah. So I became estranged from them. Um, when I left Colorado,
Mm.
um, in 2000, I left Colorado in 2003
Mhm.
and wound up again, another girl in the picture, making bad choices. And I became estranged from my daughters. And I will tell you this, the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life is trying to rebuild the relationships with them.
Mhm.
But like, I am so blessed to be associated with good people because I just got back last week. I spent 10 days in Colorado with my daughter, Courtney, and my grandsons, Reggie and Renton. And today is actually his birthday. He's 6 years old, Renton. And so happy birthday, Renton. And I got to spend a week in Breckenridge with no alcohol, no drugs, riding the summer thing gondola up to the top of the mountains, watching them play. I got to live, you know,
Mhm.
after decades of self-abuse. And part of me of sharing this is I know for sure that there's other veterans
Mhm.
that are exactly where I was, and they're there right now.
Or they
And
know
like,
someone who is.
yeah. And I want to be that resource where like, and I have been very lucky to be that resource for some veterans that are aspiring to do something. And my challenge, brother, was always not the VA. It wasn't their way of doing things. It was I I could go to a program, I could ace the program. I was given all the tools, but there was a gap for me in between treatment and civilian life, just like in the military.
Mhm.
There was a gap. Like, I could not function without discipline. Like, I needed
Mhm.
some set of rules or something to work under. So trying to live by that is I should rephrase that. Living by that with the self-discipline that I've learned enables me to be able to do things like go to Colorado, see my kids and all of that. And to not need alcohol and drugs to do that is amazing. So yeah, my hope is to be able to be a liaison for these guys that can call me, and I don't care. You 2 o'clock in the morning, whatever, wherever you are. I know enough people going through this now that wherever a veteran is in the country, wherever they're at, whatever they're going through, I can help them find resources to get them help, to
Mhm.
get them off the street, and to get them into treatment.
So you were able to get out into the outdoors. This sort of leads us into
Yeah,
the
the fun part.
walks. These walks
Yeah,
are incredible that you've done multiple
yes, sir.
times. And we're not talking like, I'm going to go take a walk around the park. This is
No.
miles, miles, miles.
Yeah. Yes, yes, yes. So when I went to Wyoming and was there at the base of the Bighorns, remember I was going away every weekend coming back.
Mhm.
Well, one night I went outside and there was a peer support, and peer supports at the VA, at every VA facility I've ever been at, man. The peer support guys and gals have always been like the coolest. You have to have a year sober. They have to have been through some stuff in their life, and I could relate to them. And this peer support was sitting outside with me. It was 2 a.m. He's sitting outside with me, and he said to me, dude, you're always going away on the weekend. Like, you leave Thursday, you come back Sunday all filthy, you don't do nothing for 3 days, and then you go out and do it again. Like, you do that over and over, and you're happy. Like, what do you do? I told him, I backpack and I take my phone and I use it as a camera. I take pictures. I started showing him pictures. He was like, holy shit, like, sugar, this is really good. Like, you're talented. You ought to, what about doing a long distance hike? Like, something that you could do for several months. And he told me about the Pacific Crest Trail
Mhm.
going from Canada to Mexico, 2,653 miles. He told me that story in May of 2000, sorry, 2021. And I'm sorry, 2020.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I am sorry. There goes my brain doing its thing. It was 2018 and 2019 I hiked it. So in
Okay.
2018, in May of 2018, he told me about the Pacific Crest Trail. By July 8th, I was southbound on the trail.
Hmm.
I took 6, 7 weeks to plan it, flew out to Seattle, took a bus from Seattle up to the top of Canada, and began to meet other southbound hikers on the Pacific Crest Trail, which would turn
Mhm.
out to be the journey that literally helped save my life, and is now still the direction on which my photography is based on.
Mm-hmm.
And if any veteran has ever considered doing something like a long distance hike, for me personally, I can say without it, I don't know if I'd be alive.
Mm-hmm.
I was able to, what it did for me is it helped me gain a sense of community again, a sense of
Huge.
love again. Yes,
Mm-hmm.
huge. Community, love, people helping other people. Now I'm a New Yorker who was homeless in Fulton County, Georgia, in trouble in and out of jail. Like, I was the dude. I'm very, very not expecting this type of love. And I don't even know it's out there in the
Mm-hmm.
world. I don't know what a hiker box is. I don't know what a trail angel is. I don't know any of these things. But those things turned out to be things that are built by people.
Mm-hmm.
And people and kindness are the things in my life. The kindness of other people that do kind things and acts of love for no apparent reason. When I began to see that all along this trail that lasted me 5.5 months of hiking,
Mm-hmm.
I began to see and build little micro relationships that I still have today with people that welcome me into their home, would pick you up in the rain, let you stay with them for a couple days, all because you're on a mission of hiking.
Yeah.
Well, I get on this hike, brother, and I'm telling you, all these other veterans back at the VA I just left started following me.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all saying the same thing. Dude, I want to do that. I want to do that. So in 2019, 3 other veterans from that same facility went out and they also hiked. They went northbound, but they completed the Pacific Crest Trail from that same VA facility I was at. So a long distance hike for me allowed me to have the time in my mind. Remember, before I was saying that the hard part for me is the gap between treatment and civilian life. The gap for me, I filled with the Pacific Crest Trail. I took the time over 5 months to figure out what I want to do, where I want to live,
Mm-hmm.
and answer these questions with some sobriety and be
Yep.
able to have some clarity in my mind so I could see and I could think the way, my calling, my foundation is built on God and my faith in God. So with so much Matthew in the brain, though, there's no room for God. There's no time for him up there. So a long distance hike took that time and that space in my mind and opened it up and allowed me to receive the love and kindness out there of other people, which allowed me eventually to start loving myself.
Do you think that all happened on that first hike?
No. And that's a great question, because after the first hike, and this is critical, I will say the biggest thing about hiking the PCT, number one, the hardest part about hiking the PCT is the decision to do it. And number two, the most important thing you can do for the PCT is to decide ahead of time what you're going to do after. Because when I finished the hiking the first time, my life collapsed. I remember coming back to this. I found a place to stay out in California at a farm. And I remember just everything being gone. The community I built, all these people were now just like fake people on my phone. I physically had no place to go. I physically had no place to get mail. I had people now from that were spread out, that some were still hiking, some were, I just felt like I had nothing. I dove back into addiction so fast it wasn't even funny. And that lasted for months. And this is in between 2018, 2019. And in 2019, I had gotten a call from someone that I hiked Washington, the entire state, with the first time. And I had been calling her and calling her and calling her. I'm like, I'm in trouble. I'm in trouble. And one day she was like, Matthew, you call once a week and you keep saying the same things. You're in trouble. You don't know what to do. And she said very powerfully, the only time I've seen you know what to do is when you were hiking. Why don't you get on a plane, come back up to Washington and hike again? Just start southbound and just do Washington. And as soon as my feet hit the trail, it was July 13th. southbound. As soon as my feet hit the trail, I knew I wasn't going to stop.
Mhm.
And hiking it the second time, completely different. And you can see it, mostly you can see it in my photography. It went from pictures of mountains to pictures of people looking at mountains. I was inspired to see how the outdoors was affecting not just me anymore, but other people. So I aspired to ask around other veterans or other hikers, hey, are you a veteran? Are you a veteran? And 1 out of every 10 would be like, yeah, I served. And I'd strike up conversations. I'd break up my phone and I'd start interviewing them and dreaming one day I'm going to build a documentary about this.
Mm-hmm.
And so that became my passion. And it took me a month longer to hike it the second time because I kept stopping so much. I'd stay in this town and that town, and I meet so many nice people and people from the first time I hiked with, and it became community. And I realized that it was my responsibility to keep that community going and to keep staying involved with other veteran organizations that do things for veterans. And I'd like to mention some of those that I've been involved with later if you want, but there's some groups out there that will take veterans hiking, pay for your airfare, put you on a plane, fly you to Denver, pick you up, take you hiking for 5 days, and put you back in the plane, and you won't spend a penny. So there's organizations out there like that. So I would like to put that out there. The No Barriers is the name of the one I'm thinking of. No Barriers. Yeah, it was founded by the first blind guy who hiked Mount Everest. And I apologize for getting his name, but he also kayaked the Grand Canyon. The guy's amazing. But he starts off the No Barriers thing with something I'd like to share. And it has to do with hiking the Pacific Crest Trail or of any major accomplishment that you hit. And especially if you're an addict or recovering addict. I say now, just so you know, like, I don't say that I had a battle with addiction, but it's won. I won that. I don't believe in going into places and saying, hi, I'm Matthew and I am anything but successful. I don't believe in saying that. So I don't. Each their own. But the No Barriers program, oh, there goes my brain again, dude. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
What was I saying?
You're talking about No Barriers, the guy that did Blind, who did the
yes,
and he starts off the website with a quote.
Yes, he starts off saying that what was said to him when he hit Mount Everest, his guide said to him, "Don't let Mount Everest be the greatest thing you ever do." So I had to take that and put that towards the Pacific Crest Trail. Don't let that trail, hiking it twice, be the greatest accomplishment of your life. Use that. And let's move on to the next thing. And let's go to the next thing. And let's go to the next thing. So I've been able to, with the help of a lot of other people, begin to build that documentary film that I long to build. My goal is to have a documentary film that can be shown in every VA facility in the country, so that when these veterans that are struggling are sitting there watching it, they see what is possible in the mountains. They see the healing that's out there. I don't throw faith at people. I don't throw Bibles at people. I don't throw my faith is my own walk, and Christ is part of my story, and it is part of my documentary, and it doesn't have to be part of everybody's. You know, we all make our own choices. The point of doing the documentary is to give hope, so that when you're sitting there and you go, I don't know what I'm going to do when I graduate this program. The VA wants to find me a job. I don't want to work again right now. I'm waiting on my disability. I've got all this shit going on. I'm in a divorce, blah, 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 blah. Hike a trail, get a backpack. There's always a trail open sometime in some place. And if there's veterans out there that are struggling with getting gear, backpacks, sleeping bags, stuff like that, make sure you contact me, because I do have resources for veterans that I can get you gear.
What is the best way for someone to reach you?
You know, I'm cool with giving out my cell phone number. I'm that type of dude. But if you want, my email address is my last name Landis, Landis. So it's Landis and the word mailbox, Landis mailbox at Gmail. Super and then that's easy. And then I do like Matthew.Landis is my Instagram. and Matthew J. Landis 44 is my Facebook. I try to
Well,
throw my photos on there. Landis Adventure Photography is my website for all my photography, landisadventurephotography.com. And even if there's veterans out there that are considering taking up photography, like right now, the VA is paying for me to go to school part-time at the Southern New Hampshire University. They're paying for the computer. They're paying for me to go to school. They give you a little bit of housing allowance, the vocational rehab program. If you're serious about getting into a different career or something like that, that's a fantastic opportunity out there for veterans that you can use with your hike. Like I just got doing Katahdin last weekend, and I was able to do some of the schoolwork on my phone. Like, it's pretty simple. So there's a lot of opportunities out there.
I find it interesting because a couple of reasons. Number one, my brother, who lives out in Wyoming, and I visited him out in Jackson Hole, and it's just
awesome.
One of the most beautiful places. I'll actually be out there. This podcast will air a little late, but I'll be out in Colorado visiting him in Boulder next week. He's a big climber, big outdoors guy, despite growing up at Virginia Beach and loving, he's like, yeah, the beach is great. I want to see mountains.
Yeah.
So I follow him. He did a bit of the Appalachian Trail years ago. Didn't complete it, but walked up from Georgia up into like North Carolina.
Sure.
Big hiker. So talking with him about sort of what a hike is, like I wouldn't know anything there is to know about. I go out, I'll do a hike, with my wife, my kids, we'll go out and, do the woods for a little bit, but walking every day, like you start thinking, you don't realize like, oh, you're doing probably 18, 20 miles a day. Like you are footing it, and it's tough walking. It's not just flat road, easy. Like you're subject to the elements, subject to injury because your knees, your hips, your muscles, like everything, like all of that has to be tuned and ready to go for that level of commitment of walking. So being able to do Pacific Coast Trail for twice, even once, is a huge undertaking, not just mentally, because mentally, this is what my brother said. I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. Is he said, I didn't enjoy doing the Appalachian because I like hiking to a goal. I want to hike to a climbing spot, climb, and then hike out. Like he loved doing that. He's like, but just the mental stress of like, I'm hiking today. I'm going to do 18, 20 miles. And that's kind of what my day is. He's like, I couldn't really get my head around. And he was younger at that time. But how did you deal with that? Because I mean, you're in your head. You might not have anybody to talk to that whole day. You might be hiking for 3 days and not see anybody. It might be good to have that sort of like solitude and really sort of like, get that alone time. But eventually for me, I'd be like, I'm kind of bored with talking to myself. I don't know.
Yeah. No, that's right on the money, man. A good example of that would be like the Sierra Nevadas. So the Sierra Nevadas, you can go a trek out there for 8 days, I think was our longest. My second time doing it, I was southbound through them, and I got a late start. So I was up near Yosemite in the beginning of November.
Ooh.
So people were telling me I was crazy. You can't do that. Search and rescue is going to be looking for you, blah, blah, blah. But I had already done it once. I had a beacon. I had an SOS beacon. I had the gear. I knew what I was doing, but I was alone. And I did go out there and I videoed and took photos that I still to this day for five out of the 8 days that I wound up needing a resupply after 5. 5 days, not another footprint, not another human being in sight from the top of, you're talking 13,000 footers, and not one human being. That was the by far the greatest part of both hikes for me, because I had no one. And I was like looking at coyote foot tracks and deer tracks, and just like, and I had time, like I was saying before, I allowed time. And what a beautiful place to be able to do that, to wake up in the morning, like you said, to look at my goal for the day. Okay, I want to camp there tonight because it's listed as, there's an app that tells you, years ago, word of mouth and a map. Now you have an app that will tell you what your next camp, where your water is, all this stuff. Anyway, so you set your goal, it's 18 miles, right? And it allows you to like kind of plan for me, it allowed me to plan my day. I would break it down like a football game. I got 20 miles. Cool. I'll do 4, 4, 4, and 4. Or sorry, 5, 5, 5. Do 5 miles, stop, take a break. 5 more miles, and it's halftime. Take my shoes off, lay down for an hour in the sun, just relax, force yourself to relax, do 5 more miles and take one more break. And you only have 5 to go. And then 5 more miles. And then you feel like when you arrive at that camp, like I would feel like I accomplished something major for the day. 18 miles through the Sierras is absolutely brutal, but it's worth it. Like this, the scenery, the views, the sounds, the smell. It amazes me that there's a place in America like that so many people haven't seen. It's
Oh,
just
yeah.
stunning, you know?
Absolutely. You fly into Jackson and you're blown away by the Tetons. Going
Oh
up to
yeah,
Yellowstone and just seeing
the
the
Wind
views, the
River.
vistas. Yeah. Um, this leads me to an
Stunning.
interesting question because your mind and your body were sort of used to this addiction, what you needed, the fix that you
Yeah.
needed from something other than.
Yeah.
Then you head out into the wilderness and you start to expose your senses, all of them, to
Yep.
this, to what we just said, the mountains and air
Yes.
and noise or no noise. And how did your body shift with that? Was it
That, that's a great question, man, because I worried about that. I was like, how am I going to go from like drinking every day to not? And I will tell you, I don't know how this happened, but I suffered from no withdrawals, none. But I went from like every day and to zero. And I am telling you, I am positive now that it's mental. It's the mind that's producing these chemicals, these things that are causing us to need, to want. I've had alcohol in my system for a year every day. It's going to freak out. Like I'm telling myself these things are going to happen. I will tell you, something comes from beating yourself to death on a trail for doing it from sunrise to sunset, that by the time the end of the day comes, you are so physically exhausted that you don't have the energy to cook ramen noodles, that you just don't have the energy to blow up your air mattress, that when you finally get that done and your tent set up, you collapse. You're just spent, done. Wake up in the middle of the night, eat a Snickers bar, go back to sleep. Like something magical happened during those few days in the Sierras that I had the opportunity to have zero and to feel what a zero feels like, to have no alcohol, no nothing, and to be so alert
mm,
and just sharp and remember things and remember conversations and people. It opened up a whole new way for my brain to think. So I personally did not have any physical. I think my brain, my mind replaced what could have been a bad situation with the mountains. Like your brother was saying, I'd rather be like in the mountaintops. And I'm the same way. I love the Appalachian Trail. I live right next door to it. I just hiked Katahdin last weekend. I think it's beautiful here, but the Rocky Mountains are my home, my photography home. It's where I love to be. My daughters still live in Breckenridge, so I'm blessed to be able to have to go out there and see. Hey, would you? This is my service dog. Come here. Say hi. Come here. Ups.
what's your service dog's name? Ah,
His
cute.
name's Kauai.
Kauai.
Like the island Kauai.
Yeah,
Kauai.
right.
Yeah, he's a
Um,
good boy. We've had him for 2 years.
yeah, going. So, how did you get connected with Kauai?
When I was in Sheridan, Wyoming. Do you know that's just north of Buffalo?
Mm-hmm.
So the VA facility out there, when I was there was a program that came out that there was a local retired Marine that was training service dogs. He had done canine for the state patrol, so he was really good at what he did. And he was going to the local shelter to interview, I guess, dogs that could qualify to be a service dog. And Kauai and I met. I mean, the day we met, I came up, stuck his nose in my belly, and he was like, "What we do is we have you take him home for the weekend, try him out." See, it's a little windy. I'm just gonna go inside.
No problem.
Um, yeah, they were like, uh, take him home for the weekend, try it out, see how he does, and all this. And we have been inseparable ever since.
So,
So, dude,
you've been clean for how long?
2 years, 5 months.
That's awesome.
Yep,
That's
2 years,
truly
5 months,
awesome.
man. Yeah,
So,
it's
at
amazing.
at times, do you feel that old need, and how do you fill that?
So, that's a very, very good question. So, what I've done is I've enrolled myself into different things, I don't know what to call them, that take my time that are geared towards recovery. And one of them that I use is called Celebrate Recovery. And Celebrate Recovery is kind of like a 12-step, but it's biblical. It's based on the Bible.
Mhm.
And it was started by Rick Warren, who wrote Purpose Driven Life, and is an amazing, absolutely amazing organization.
Mhm.
It's helped save thousands of people's lives. Celebrate Recovery. So inside of Celebrate Recovery, there's often a what's called a men's group, and the men's group will meet every Saturday for an hour or so. And I've been meeting with them now for about 4 months. So every Saturday I go in, we sit down. There's 6 of us, and we just talk, man. There's a guide of stuff that we go through about how we're handling life and how we get to handle the problems that led us to our addictions, and really peeling back layers of stuff and going back and realizing that all those things I had mentioned before, like traumas that happen to you when you're younger, how they come out and how they do manifest themselves.
Mhm.
And ironically, like using things like that 12-step meeting with the guys, uh we had just briefly talked about acupuncture.
Mhm.
So acupuncture, Tai Chi, and uh uh meditation, those 3 things for me are like a cocktail of sobriety.
Mhm.
Meet with other people that are living the way I want to live and have somebody I can call.
Community.
Yep. Community, having people that I can, having my calendar filled with things that I know that are challenging, upcoming events, photography, obligations. Um, and then like things like going to school again, making a decision to go back to college, having things that occupy my brain, because there's a lot of room in there, man. And my brain will, from time to time, it'll drift towards what ifs and what ifs that. But I am so blessed where I'm at in my recovery to have discovered that my ultimate way of recovery is helping other people recover.
Mhm.
By doing that, there's something that happens in my brain that I feel like it's come full circle. Like those things that I was given, I literally call it turning a mess into a message.
Mhm.
Taking that life that was just that had fallen apart and going, look, it may have taken this long, but I just spent a week with my daughter and grandsons. Like it's happening. I've had conversations with my ex-wife. There's been healing. There's been forgiveness. There's been I love yous, and there's been it's okay, and we start again, and we live and we move on. It's not staying stuck in the past anymore. It's filling your day with people, community, filling my calendar with events that are going to challenge me and occupy my time. You know, I think one of the greatest challenges that veterans have is when they get 100% disability, what to do with their time.
Mhm.
It was for me anyway. I had to like be involved with something, you know. So yeah, man, that's a good. And then in those calendar events, when you're throwing in things like the outdoors and you're inviting other veterans to come and your photography is growing and things like that, there's I had the opposite feeling towards using now. I would never. Why would I want to? There's nothing there. There's nothing but the past in that. So I just choose not to.
That's excellent. One thing that keeps ringing to me, there are 2 things, and they're kind of in the same column. Is
Yeah.
one, you had a lot of guardian angels
Yes.
that somehow at the right moment in your life, especially when you OD'd in the car, that
Especially.
found their way to you.
Yes.
Is one, I'd like you to speak to these guardian angels, but 2, it's twofold. The second question I have is, did this lead you to have a stronger faith, or was that always a part of your life?
No. Fabulous question. And so in speaking to those angels, there's almost no words I can say that line up the gratitude and the appreciation and the thanks. The message I get is it's almost a whisper of I need you to do it now. Like I did, someone did it for you, Matthew. Now you got it. You need to do it for others, not just one, everyone. Like don't limit it to this one because he's suffering. Everyone is suffering with something. Everyone's struggling with something. So, um, what what that did for me is I grew up Catholic, and I became atheist the moment I joined the Air Force. For a long time, I never set foot in a church. I wanted nothing to do with sit, kneel, stand. I did not like traditional, altar boy, this, that, and being quiet in church. I was down in Georgia, actually. I was home when I was in Atlanta, and I walked into my first Southern Baptist church, and I saw what worship was like. These people were happy and they were singing. I had never seen anything like that. Mm-hmm. So I became more into the non-traditional, non-denominational, just following God, just following Jesus, just love each other and keeping it simple and keeping man's ideas out of the way and putting Jesus's ideas in the way, making those the foundation. And those people that showed up in my life were no doubt sent, because I was at a critical time, and possibly, even you're talking one decision the wrong way. Even that girl that was in the car with me that called 911, she could have just walked away, and just ran away and just never saw me again. And my daughters would have got that phone call. So when those people appear in my life, I consider it a gift from God and something to be shared with other people, for sure. If that makes sense.
Complete sense. And for our listeners, all of the links that Matthew's described here are going to be here in the chat as well, from the book to your websites, to Celebrate Recovery. I want to have all of those links down here.
Okay.
For people to just scroll down and click on, and whether they click on and look at a photo, or they
sure,
decide to connect with you and say, hey, I know somebody who could use some help, or I could use some help.
Yes.
I think it's amazing that you are opening up your door like that to anybody, to strangers, and saying,
anybody,
I can help like I was helped.
Yes.
Matthew, I just want to thank you for this time, for your sharing your sure. truth, really, and sharing this story, because these are the points in the podcast. It's always nice to have organizations on, hear different veteran stories, hear guys that are out there like, hey, I transitioned out and I was having a tough time, but now I'm a public speaker and I found a new mission and all that. But it's sometimes very rare when we have someone on that has such a story like yours that just says, I was at I fell off the rope. I wasn't at the bottom. I fell off the rope, and somehow it extended, or somehow I was able to catch back onto it and get pulled out, and just where you're at now and just trying to help everybody. It's very, very inspirational.
Thank you.
Yeah, I get chills on recordings like this. So I just want to thank you so much for talking with me today, and
absolutely,
thanks.
My pleasure, man. Absolutely, it's an honor to be here. It's an honor to be seeing other organizations out there that are doing things like you're doing, to be able to touch the people with the stories. Because a lot of times, like I was saying before, there's a lot of resources and there's a lot of veterans, but it's people like you that kind of connect those in the middle to where people have an option.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's certainly an honor and a pleasure to speak with you. And to our audience, like, share, subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube so you're the first to know whenever we release new episodes. If you have any thoughts about this particular episode, or would like to be, like me to introduce you to Matthew, I'm happy to do that. You can do that through Shaun, SHAUN, at veteransbreakfastclub.org. Be happy to hear what you think of Matthew's story, or how you can get more involved, ways that you can find help. We're happy to help you out here at the Veterans Breakfast Club. Otherwise, Matthew, again, I'd love to reconnect in a year, have you back on the scuttlebutt, say hey, where are you at? Where are you hiking? What's going on? It'd be awesome.
Yeah.
And especially for sure, when you complete this documentary, we do screenings with VBC. We'd love to screen it if you're game.
That would be absolutely a huge plus. I'm currently looking for ideas and ways to be able to take. I've got 14,000 photos, over 700 videos sitting there, and trying to create something with that is a very big challenge for me. So I'm open to any help, any ideas on how to get that rolling. That would be great. I did want to share that when I was out in Colorado a couple weeks ago, up in Keystone, Colorado, there was an art festival that I proclaimed to myself and to a few other people, but now I'm going to proclaim it on this show, that I proclaim to take my photography to that art show, the Keystone Art Festival. It's a very hard show to get into. You have to have your photography has to pass a board of judges. It's a very, very big, I mean, these guys are like National Geographic stuff. And when I was there, that voice inside of me, that good voice said to me, you can be here. I want you here. So I set a goal, and I've already written to them and everything and said, I want to be in the show next year. What do I need to do? And I've already laid out game plan and blueprints. So hopefully next year when we talk, it'll be after I completed the Keystone Art Festival show, and we should have some great feedback on them about the documentary as well.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
I'm crossing my fingers for you. I hope it all works out.
Keystone Art Festival 2024.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you, Matthew. And to our audience, we'll see you on another episode of The Scuttlebutt.
Okay, much love.
Thank you for watching this episode of The Scuttlebutt. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsor, tobacco-free Adagio Health. Tobacco-free Adagio Health has been supporting the podcast for quite some time now. We've been so pleased to be supported by them. They are dedicated to reducing and preventing tobacco use and getting the word out about the hazards of smoking and secondhand smoke. They're all about health, so they want people to quit. They have classes, nicotine replacement therapy, and a popular quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. They also educate people, children especially, about tobacco use from cigarettes, cigars, pipes, chew, snuff, and other nicotine products like vaping. And finally, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health advocates for public and private policies that ensure healthy places to live, work, and play. You can learn all about what Tobacco-Free Adagio Health offers at tobaccofree.adagiohealth.org. Or you can check out the 2 Scuttlebutt episodes that featured Tobacco-Free Adagio Health. We had a wonderful representative come on to the podcast, talk to us about all the classes and therapies that they offer. It was 2 wonderful conversations, so I definitely direct you to both of those if you want more information, or just call their free quit line, 1-800-QUIT-NOW. Thank you again, Tobacco-Free Adagio Health, for your support.